Welcome back to Prepared to Prevail, where our goal is to bring you helpful and actionable information from industry professionals that help you on your journey to daily preparedness and an upgraded level of capability. Thank you, Devon, for joining us. If you don't mind introducing yourself and what it is you do and your background and all that good stuff for those joining in.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation and the opportunity. Um, I have been, I grew up around firearms, and it clicked for me that when I moved to a state that required a permit, that when I went through the permit, that, hey, maybe I could actually train. So I got into training firearms about 5, 6, 7 years ago. And my background is heavily in IT training. So I love to train. I love firearms, and I thought I would pair those together and see what I could do to help people, especially be safe with firearms. So I saw this podcast and I thought, hey, that's a great idea. I'd love to help spread the word.
Yeah, awesome. With growing up around firearms and stuff, do you have a particular focus on like hunting, rifles, shotguns, or a focus on self-defense, pistols, both personally and professionally classes you offer? Like what are some of your areas of focus there?
I really focus on beginners at this point. I have a certification for more, I have a couple of certifications for concealed carry and personal defense, but I haven't really taught those yet. I haven't felt comfortable teaching that yet. I am really focusing on just the basics of firearms at this point, and I'm getting more and more into just helping individuals with their concealed carry choices, tips, pointers, and helping them to avoid a lot of time and expense that I experienced when I was getting into that whole world. So I'm focusing on handguns, but I started out with shotguns and rifles as a kid, and I really enjoy it all, but I'm really focusing on the handguns.
Awesome. Yeah, time and expense is no joke. You can spend hours and hours on YouTube and thousands of dollars on guns and gear that work great for somebody else, but maybe not for you.
Absolutely.
I've certainly been there. I would assume you have too. We all have that holster box or drawer or something that we joke about.
Yes.
And that's also kind of before we dive in too deep here. Would you mind giving us a snapshot of at least the state you're in? And are you more focused on like urban environments, rural environments? What's kind of your experience with that? Just kind of to lay a picture of as we get into things pertinent to new concealed carriers with like clothes and gear and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff might be pertinent, especially with the state you're in. If there's some state specific laws that we might hit on later, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm currently in Connecticut, and they are one of the states that is trying to get more and more strict on gun laws and such. There's not as much I'm sorry, there's not as much rural areas, at least not from what I'm used to. So I'm really focusing more on the urban, the metropolitan areas, the cities, everyday carry in living in town and traveling for maybe it's traveling around the state for your job or just home defense, being safe no matter where you are. Because, like you were talking about, clothing and other considerations are going to be a lot different when you're walking around to different buildings, venues, and things like that. You don't have to worry about a lot of different things when you're more out in the country.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a different world when you're talking about being in this town.
Yep. Yeah. Whole lot different than being out with the cows in the cornfields for sure. Different environment, and there's some different considerations in every environment. So that's super helpful for those that are listening from Connecticut, speaking specifically on Connecticut. If they decide, something in the news or just a personal tug or something like that, if they decide that they're going to take ownership and responsibility of their safety, and a part of that is carrying a firearm, what are some of the steps to that? Like, let's kind of first hit on legally. Is there a process? Are you a constitutional carry state? Is there a permit that's required? Like what does somebody have to do? If let's just as a hypothetical here, I decided today I'm going to start carrying a pistol on my person in Connecticut and I want to go through that process. Where do I start?
Let's say you've already made the decision that that's what you want to do, and you have thought about the potential repercussions. Chances are very good that you haven't thought of nearly as much as you should. But the first thing you'll want to pursue is a concealed carry. It's actually called a pistol permit. In this state, there are three different permits. There is an ammunition permit, which only allows you to buy ammunition. You can't buy a gun.
Hmm. Okay.
Then there's a long gun permit. So you can buy ammunition and long guns, which shotguns, rifles, things of that nature. And then your pistol permit. So that allows you to buy ammo, long guns, and handguns. And the pistol permit also allows you to carry concealed weapons. They stopped allowing open carry in this state a couple of years ago. So now it's only concealed carry, but you need the permit to buy guns and ammo and to carry a concealed firearm. So that's where you want to start going through that process, getting training. There's a prerequisite training to even get your application in. So you need your pistol permit course. You need to successfully pass a course that the state accepts. There is an additional Connecticut supplement that the state has put out that instructors also have to deliver that actually covers some of the aspects of the law on carrying, using lethal force, and when and where, what you can and can't do. Pretty high level. You take that information, both your class certificates, and go to your local police department, submit your application, do all your fingerprints, background check. Once you get that, then you
Yep.
have to take that to the state police to get your statewide, your permanent permit.
Okay. Yeah, you guys have a little bit more of a process. In Michigan here, we basically it's an 8-hour day, 5 hours in the classroom, 3 hours on the range. Put in your application, fingerprints, photo, that kind of stuff, and you're usually pretty good to go. Sounds like you guys have a little more to do with that. That ammunition permit is interesting. I won't dive in
Yeah.
on it too hard.
Yeah.
You kind of alluded to something that I really want to hit on. I was glad you kind of nudged that direction. You mentioned if I've already made that decision, and I may have filled in some blanks here, but made some moral, ethical decisions and conversations with myself. So before we start diving into, you've passed the permit process, you've obtained all the paperwork, and now you're looking at gear and gadgets. Let's back up. So what in your mind, what are some things that people need to think through? Because I love that you said that, and that's something that I personally am huge on, and that we're huge on here too. Is there's a lot more to this than just shoving a gun in your pants and just going out into the world. There's a lot of legal understanding that needs to take place, moral and ethical conversations that need to take place as well. But I'll kind of kick it back to you. What do you think that somebody needs to think through, consider, thoughts, decisions that need to be made that go a little further than just that legal paperwork?
I have found that from my own experience and a lot of people that go through the class, they have put some thought into what, it's mostly what do I need a gun for? And they want to defend themselves or maybe even their loved ones. But then they get into, well, what if I'm at home or what if I'm outside the home? Do we have what they call the castle doctrine or whatever? Like, if they're in my home, do I have the right to shoot them just because they're in my home, unwelcome, uninvited, or unauthorized? Well, the Connecticut training is basics of pistol shooting. It's not, they don't require that you have defense specific or concealed carry specific training. So when I'm delivering my basics class, I reiterate time and time again, if you are going to take this class to get a firearm for defensive purposes, take topic specific training. You will learn things in a concealed carry class that you never even thought of, which goes into far more depth about what, like I said, the legalities, what is legally allowed to use lethal force, what circumstances you have to be in. You can't just feel like you might be in danger. You have to really think about, okay, at what point do I need to say, okay, here's the line where there is imminent major physical or lethal death. It has to be, honestly, you have to think about what constitutes being afraid enough for your safety, and what is the potential. Are they just going to harm me, or are they going to harm me severely? And and what does the law say? What am I going to have to do if I end up using my gun in a situation? And what if I miss my target and hit something else or someone else? What kind of mindset do you have, do I have, that you'll end up learning about, is that might actually look like you're looking for a fight? What kind of mindset do you need to adopt and take it to heart when you decide to carry a firearm? Where and when is it illegal to carry? And even there are people that say, just because it says no firearms allowed, that I think my personal safety is more important than that sign. Well, okay, what are the ramifications in any scenario? And are you willing to take on the potential consequences of that scenario? Yeah, it's tremendous. And not even just actually using the firearm in the legality of any number of different situations, which you cannot prepare for all of them. But then what does that do to you? What might you face between yourself, your family? What kind of mental, basically, how can it screw you up mentally? Think about the awesome responsibility of potentially taking a life and how that might actually affect you for the rest of your life. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just so many different aspects of it that people don't even, it doesn't even enter their mind. And it didn't for me either until, again, I took topic specific instruction.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things you don't think about, but then there's also once you do kind of step through that threshold, it can start to feel a little overwhelming to somebody new to it. You're completely right. There's so many facets of this and so many things that we need to think about, consider, have deep understandings of. You mentioned missing your target proficiency with those tools, that kind of stuff, making sure that you are capable of what you think you're capable of, because we see that plenty where, I might think that I can run a marathon, but if I haven't trained for a marathon, no chance that I'm winning the Boston Marathon. And that's kind of my next question is, when somebody makes recognition of that potential drinking from the fire hydrant experience they could have, what are some steps that they can take? And is this something they need to do in a week's time, or is this more of a journey? If you could kind of speak to that progression, whether it's something somebody can go out and be Batman overnight, or if this is going to be more of a long-term commitment.
It's definitely a long-term thing, because like I said a little bit ago, you can't be prepared for everything. And you can only master so much information at a time. It's baby steps, really. You build on prior knowledge, you learn a little bit more, get comfortable with it, and that will open your eyes up to other realms of knowledge that you probably didn't even necessarily learn in the classes. And you may have situations where something clicks that you now have to think, oh, wait a minute, what about this member of my family, or whatever the case may be, that isn't covered in the books or the knowledge. So then you incorporate that and then move forward with yet another step in the process. And it's the way that I see it, you will never stop learning. But you also have to consider how serious you are about your safety, your family's safety. Chances are you'll never need to use your gun. But the safer you can be, the less the chances are that you may need to use your firearm. So, how to avoid situations, being aware of your surroundings where people don't want to put in that kind of attention in their everyday life. There are some people that say, I don't want to live in fear, considering all the things that they really should be paying attention to walking through the world, carrying a firearm. So each individual has to figure out how much they want to invest in their own safety and their own family safety. Because if it is paramount, absolutely, you will never stop learning. You'll never stop practicing. You'll never stop improving. But it can be a tremendous financial and uh, time sink, and not even a sink. I would say an investment to be as good as you could be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I completely agree on the investment piece because it's one of those things where is it a waste of money to put smoke alarms and fire extinguishers and things like that in my house? No, I hope they expire and I hope I never need them and I hope my house doesn't burn down. But it's an investment in that safety so that, if my house does catch on fire or something like that, hopefully we have some things in place and some ability to either mitigate that loss or slow it down so that we can escape that kind of stuff. And it's definitely an investment. And I couldn't agree more on hopefully it's never used. That's where, like on that, you mentioned conflict avoidance. That's one thing I kind of want to ask a question on here in a second too, is hopefully we cultivate these skill sets and this capability, but it's never used. And then that brings us to conflict avoidance, where if we see something coming and we see some of these markers and abnormalities, and we've picked up on some deviations from the norm of human behavior, and we think that's probably going to be a problem. I have the tools and the skill set to deal with that, but it may be better for me legally, just morally, ethically. I've got my kids with me, all that kind of stuff, to exit and find a different Walmart. Nothing against Walmart, but so conflict avoidance is that's something that I've had a couple conversations where people start viewing that as a cowardice mentality. If you're just going to tuck your tail and run. So could you kind of give me your perspective on conflict avoidance? What is that? Is that more of a strategic move, live to fight another day type of thing, or is that a act of cowardice where you're scared and you just tuck your tail and run? Like what is conflict avoidance?
That's one of those things that you have to really consider how do you want to live the rest of your life? Let's say you end up in a situation where you could have walked away and now you're in a situation where perhaps you've used your firearm. Hopefully everybody lived, but you're going to go to court. One of the biggest things that people say, it's not a matter, let's say if you have to use your firearm in a situation, you may not get charged. You may get cleared of any criminal wrongdoing or anything, but you will get sued, period. So you need a lawyer. Okay. How much do you want to have to deal with potentially years of legal battles and putting your family through that financial and burden, that stress for however long those legal battles could draw out? What's that potentially going to do to your livelihood, your mental health, your family's mental health and stress and well-being and security? So again, it's how much do you really want to how how deep of a hole do you want to dig yourself into?
Yep. What's it worth?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. And that's my opinion. I won't go on a huge spiel here, but I've kind of got like the capital W and the lowercase w, right? Where it's like if I see something developing and I'm able to avoid that and remove myself from the situation altogether, I chalk that up to a huge win. I didn't have to get involved. I didn't have to use any force. I don't have a court battle, none of that stuff. And I just move on. And hopefully I chalk up hundreds of those big W wins over the course of my life, never have to deploy and utilize the training and that kind of stuff and the tools and skill sets. And that's where I completely agree with you on that. What's it worth? Where
Right.
my mind always goes to road rage. If young man approaches you and says, "Hey, I've got a road rage problem and I want to start carrying a gun so that I can introduce that firearm into road rage," that's to me that's a huge issue. That kind of like you mentioned, knowing yourself and your things, and maybe let's remove that road rage problem and work on that, and then work toward being a responsibly armed individual in society and having that so that we can resolve problems, not contribute to them. That's kind of my take on that. I think it sounded like yours was within the same vein. Yeah, definitely don't want to put words in your mouth or anything, but kind of next question I have is with the internal decisions and the thought process and the legal understanding and all those things that have to take place in between our ears. Once we've made that decision, we've made it through the class, we've got the piece of paper, we've gotten the card. What are some next steps? So I'm just to kind of tee up a scenario here. I'm brand new to concealed carry. I've obtained all my applicable permits. I've got the gun. Let's say I've picked out the gun and the gear. We'll come back to that later. From a training perspective, let's just assume day one, I've obtained the permit, I've gone through that level of training. What are some other trainings and skill sets, tools to the tool belt that are really vital and essential to add right after that?
I would say start practicing, start getting comfortable with your gear. You're probably going to find that the gear you've chosen is not actually going to work for you. And the only way that you really truly find that out for yourself is using it. Actually go to the range, practice with your firearm and use your holster. Actually carry it and carrying it as much as you feasibly can because I mean that's why you got it. But you're going to gain experience with the firearm, various scenarios as you go about your day, just how comfortable it is. What is the position that you're carrying in? Is there actually going to be a better way to carry, a better holster? And ask, find out what is out there because it's overwhelming, all the various options. And a lot of options, the more experience that you get, you'll come to realize there's a lot out there that is kind of pointless.
Mhm.
It is variety for the sake of variety rather than being truly helpful and functional. So you find out what's good for you. While you're going through all that, look for more training. Look for, again, topic specific training. Talk to people who are good with the knowledge, but also very patient. I tend to try to make people look for the type of instructor that they want to spend time with. People think that automatically ex-military or current or former police officers, that's the way to go. I find that a lot of people act like they're in the military and they treat their students accordingly. Very harsh, very just that's no way to treat anybody. And yes, it's a huge thing, but you got to find a trainer that fits you, that takes the time to understand how you think and feel a little bit to reach you where you are rather than trying to force you into, hey, this is where you are. I'm going to yell at you to nail these points into your head. That's not necessary. But know that there are training options out there and know that there are some trainers that probably shouldn't be in the field. They should find a different line of work. So just because you've chosen a specific instructor and you don't know any different, you might think that they're the best instructor. But I don't know, shop around
Yeah.
and see what kind of people they are. I wouldn't say necessarily that because you're not going to do background checks on your instructors, I'm sure. But ask around and see what other people recommend or who other people recommend and why.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
and pursue additional training while you're getting used to your gear and gaining experience.
Yeah. So it sounds like a few of the key points there are vetting your instructors. Basically, I know you joked about not running a background check on them probably, but for all intents and purposes, you essentially can through other reviews, word of mouth, referrals, that kind of stuff, making sure it's a good culture fit. If I've never heard a cuss word in my life and then the instructor's up there dropping 500 F bombs in the first hour, I'm probably not going to be super comfortable and want to stay there. And I can probably vet that out with a phone call, just giving them a call before I sign up for the class and talking to them and getting at least somewhat of a feeling of how they are, how they talk to me, that kind of stuff. And that sounds like that was kind of what you're saying is vetting your instructors, making sure it's going to be a good fit for you. Cause again, this is an investment in your training and your learning. And you want to make sure that you're going to actually learn and be able to absorb what they're saying versus sitting there and hoping you don't get screamed at the whole class.
Yeah, if you don't feel safe in the class that you're in, what are the chances you're going to actually absorb the information rather than being scared that you don't want to say, you don't want to ask a question because you don't want to be yelled at? and you need to be able to ask questions.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then seeking out the experts in those disciplines. Cause I love what you said about discipline specific stuff, where if I leave the CPL class and I think, all right, next I want to take some medical. So sorry, I said CPL. That's what we call it in Michigan, concealed weapons class. So we, if I decide that I'm new to this and I'm going to be carrying a firearm in society, maybe some medical considerations. I want to look for the expert in that field, whether de-escalate, whatever discipline it is, seeking out the expert in my area in that field versus just, this is the guy I took my concealed carry class through. I'm going to go back to him. That's great. And as instructors, everybody absolutely appreciates that loyalty and that repeat business. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with seeking out an instructor that's an expert in this discipline, another one in this discipline, and then so on and so forth. And then meshing that all together and creating a system that works for you. That's kind of my opinion. What's your take on that?
I absolutely agree. I am very forthcoming with my students to tell them what it is that I'm teaching and what I'm strong with. And if they're asking for certain things that I don't have the experience or that I'm not comfortable enough in my experience to where I feel like I'm going to give them quality instruction. I tried to get to know some of my fellow instructors and even work with them if I can, or maybe even take a class from them if they will offer that, so that I can get to know their training style, get to know how good they are with various things, so that I can say, hey, I think you need to learn this, but I'm not the one to teach it to you. Let me give you some recommendations because I can personally vouch for their personality, their teaching style, and their knowledge. So yeah, go. I would love to have you as a return customer, but I would rather you learned from somebody who knows better what they're telling you and what they're teaching.
Right, especially in specific topics. I mean, I think that's a huge thing that instructors need to be cognizant of too, is yes, it's a business and there's repeat customer and that's phenomenal. But I kind of think of it like getting a burger, where if I want to get a burger in 10 minutes, there's a McDonald's up the road. I can have a burger on this table in 10 minutes, but if I want a quality burger that I'm going to enjoy the flavor, the toppings, everything that goes along with it, I might need to go, not here to pick on McDonald's, which if they want to sponsor the show, will say great things. The point being that if I want to get a different quality burger than McDonald's, not going to say it's bad, but different quality burger than McDonald's, I'm probably going to seek out a local burger joint, restaurant, or something like that. And that's not to water it down to burgers, but it's kind of my take too. Is you might be able to get the burger, but if you want it the way that you want it and the quality you want it at, then maybe taking like a firearms course from a paramedic doesn't really make sense. They might be a phenomenal CPR AED first aid instructor, but we'll shift over and take the firearms courses from those that specialize in those areas. The other kind of next thing I want to transition to here is we mentioned continued training and continuing to round out that skill set and those tools on that tool belt. Now let's actually talk about the tools on the tool belt. I won't give too much here, but firearm, some other considerations, the things that hold the firearm, maybe the system that supports it. Let's kind of start diving down that rabbit hole a little bit. How does somebody even make a decision? When we were talking before the recording went on here, I mentioned something about that. I joke there's 5 million options, 2.5 are good on paper, and one's going to work perfectly for you or me or John Smith down the road or whatever. How do I work down that track? And kind of a little follow-up question there is, how do I work down that track, especially when I have people telling me what to buy, what works for them, and that kind of thing? Because I think that's a huge point that we should hit on, is if I walk into XYZ gun shop down the road, I'm going to leave with some recommendations. And how do I make that decision for myself and weigh recommendations and vet some of that stuff, vet those recommendations? Like, how do I really work through that process?
I definitely tell people to ask a lot of questions and ask multiple people, but always take their advice with a grain of salt, because there are people that I use Glock as a classic example because I've heard it more than any other brand of firearm. What do I need to get? I've been told you need to get a Glock. Why? Because they like Glock? Why do they say you need a Glock? No, no, you need what works for you. I don't like Glock. And I tell my students, I don't like Glock. But that's my opinion. I'm not going to dissuade you from getting a Glock because they have a great reputation for a reason. You know, they're phenomenal. A lot of people love them, and there's a reason for it. You might be one of those people. So try a Glock. You might love it. Just because I love it doesn't mean you will. Just because it suits my purposes doesn't mean it's going to work for you. So talk to different people. Ladies, talk to other women because I can't give you a similar comparison. I can't say, oh, yeah, I know what that's like. Talk to other women, talk to people with similar builds if
Hmm.
you can. Yeah, if you can find people that have similar lifestyles, talk to them because they're going to have probably the closest semblance of your life or the closest copy that actually has relevant experience to draw on and give you examples. But you're still going to have to do a little bit of experimentation. And if people with a lot of experience have found I had to make this choice, I loved this initially, but then I found because of this thing, I realized it wasn't such a good choice for me. And if they can let you borrow their gear, oh, even better. Even better. So you're not spending money on stuff that you're not actually going to need. But there are certain things that you talk to people and ask them why it's not a good idea. Like, you don't need a belt that is specific for holsters, but it'll help. You know, you need a sturdy belt, and the reason for that, you know, if you're wearing a belt and it happens to curl up, roll up like those belts that are thin webbing, yeah, that's not going to go work very well for your holster. So, okay, get a good sturdy belt, thick that doesn't fold or roll when you're wearing it in whatever your activities are. But yeah, if try as many options as you can without buying them.
Yep.
and and talk to people that have those things. Let's say you've landed on something that you think is going to work well for you. If you can talk to somebody who has experience with that exact firearm, holster, carry position, things of that nature, see what you can glean from that and still try it. You're going to spend way less money than if you just go blindly buy something because it looks good. Even if it feels good, that doesn't mean it's going to feel good 2, 3 hours in of you carrying these things around with you. Or you find that you're spending money on stuff that you've realized that where you're carrying isn't even going to work for you at all. So you have to figure out a different holster because you're going to carry it maybe in back behind you, in front of you, you know, like appendix carry. What is appendix carry? You'll hear people throw around terms. What does that mean? And why is that important? You know, hear the pros and cons of every choice because if you're carrying a gun for protection, then every detail matters and nothing is going to be perfect. But spend the time and the money to get as close as you can because it may mean your life.
Yeah.
Don't take it lightly.
No, absolutely not. It's definitely, in my opinion, a common theme of preparedness or personal capability, taking ownership and responsibility of your own safety is intentionality. I mean, it's highly intentional. The holster you're selecting, it's is there one that's $20 cheaper? Maybe, but this one works better. So I'm going to pony up the extra $20 and I'm going to be intentional and save up the extra $20 and buy the thing that the more perfect fit there is. I like what you said about that there's no perfect fit, and even when we were talking earlier, that there's not always going to be a perfect solution. Sometimes it's kind of good enough for who it's for to a degree, and that's why we see so much variety, because you hit on Glock. And it's funny, I am a big fan of Glock. I love Glocks. But that's what I always tell people is kind of the opposite, where you said, I don't like Glocks. I say, I like Glocks. but that doesn't mean it's going to work for you. So it's that candidness of there's so many options. If I choose a Glock appendix carry with a weapon light on it and a red dot on it, is that exactly what the rest of the world needs? No, absolutely not. It has to be the right fit for them. So I completely agree on that. What are some of those things that you see? Like what are let's kind of start with the essentials. We've moved down that track. We've gotten the paperwork to carry. We've picked out a pistol. How do we kind of select some of this other stuff? Like, do I need to put all sorts of gadgets and gizmos on it? I know it's, a journey and a process, but how do I like really kind of the meat and potatoes of how do I flush some of that out where there's Glock, Smith and Wesson, SIG. I won't even go down the holster manufacturers list because be here for hours. But like, what are some resources that can help you? Because I like the theme of saving money. Absolutely, the Dutch in me loves that, and it's like trying other people's stuff. You hit on the firearms community is very friendly. You see that whether it be at classes or matches or anything. If somebody wants to shoot my gun and run their ammo through it, have at it. As long as I'm not paying for your ammo, no problems. It's one of those things. Same with holsters. Try it on, feel it. Don't spend the money. But outside of that too, like really just to get a starting point of what are some good resources to at least make a list of objectively good options.
I haven't really found a tremendous amount of resources online for that kind of thing. I mean, there are some things like certain websites that are not always from the same organization, like the USCCA. If you are so inclined, honestly, YouTube product reviews on YouTube have helped me tremendously when I was looking at things. Look up, let's say, hey, you have a gun or a holster or some specific piece of equipment that you're thinking about buying. Google it and Google not just that, but reviews and see what you can find and watch definitely more than one to see because like again, it's the personalized or personalization. It's not the word I'm looking for. Personal opinion. Every one of those people reviewing it are giving you. Some of them are giving you some very objective opinions, and you'll learn as you watch them. Oh, this person is really throwing in a bunch of personal opinion. This person is really giving me a pros and cons and letting me choose for myself.
Yep.
So find good resources that you are comfortable with. And like I said, YouTube is honestly been one of the best things.
Yeah.
So, and then your instructors, because if you know your instructor and you see how truly committed they are to your knowledge, your safety without a personal agenda, they're probably going to point you in different places that are really going to be tremendous and that maybe some of the other instructors don't even know about, haven't discovered yet.
Yeah. And that's really multiple sources. And then figuring out like YouTube University is phenomenal. There is some stuff that's probably not accurate and correct on YouTube, just like any place, and you got to flush that out. If anybody tells you that this is the gun, I promise if we knew the gun that was the perfect fit for every person in every situation, we would say it right here on this video and we'd, be breaking news. It doesn't exist. And it's all subjective. It's all opinion based, even things right down to the grip texturing, where another thing you hit on earlier was how it feels in the gun shop. Well, that's great. This hyper aggressive grip texture is going to keep this thing in my sweaty hands. But then when it's rubbing on my belly all day for a 12, 14, 16, however long I'm awake, hour day, I know guys that have scars from aggressive grip texturing. It's one of those things. You throw an aggressive grip texture in your pants and you go for a hike up north and um, I won't name him, but he's got the purple scarring to prove it. It's one of those things.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
it's like even some of those little things though is how do you work around some of that stuff where like throwing an undershirt underneath it. I think you kind of alluded to a little bit on like carry positions and that kind of stuff, appendix versus like on the hip carry. Like where I'm going with that is appendix. You hear a lot. Well, I have a belly. Well, I have a belly too. And It's one of those things. We're Americans. We all have bellies. And so how do you work around some of that kind of stuff if without going like into, you must buy a Glock 19 with a T-Rex Arms holster, like what do you have a little bit of a list in your mind of some at least some good options? Like for me, just on guns anyways, offerings from SIG, Smith& and Wesson, Glock, HK, Walther, among several others. To
Mhm.
me, those are good things to look at. And we may be here an hour, but in your opinion, like some kind of holster brands, even lights, red dots, that kind of stuff, just at least a little bit of a kind of starting point for people, or at least brands you've had experience with that you've had positive feedback on.
I have not delved into light and optics yet. I have felt like I'm ready, but I don't see the value yet in adding additional complexity to my firearm, because the more that you have on your firearm, the more you complicate your setup, the more you have to deal with and potentially have to have some sort of plan or even practice a what I might call an emergency procedure. So, what about your optic, your red dot? Is the battery even working? If your battery isn't working, do you have time to do anything about it? Or can you see your sights, or what they call co witness? See your sights even though your red dot isn't working? Your light. Why do you need a light? Why do you need that big chunk of something, what it's is weight, or again, another mechanical or even electronic device attached to your firearm? Do you need that? What situations would you need that? And are those situations far less likely to be possible based on your life and where you are and so forth? Or, hey, maybe you might think about adding a light or carrying a separate light. So start with what's the purpose? Because just because it's new and fancy doesn't mean that's going to be the best for you. And that sometimes, and I would say in a lot of cases, and true is a really, it's hard to go wrong with that. In the firearm world, the greatest, the newest version of something isn't necessarily the best. And I think I hear Glock, the generation, I think it's the generation 3 Glocks, people prefer those way more than the more recent generations. And not being a Glock guy, I can't really say that for a fact, but 1911, it was patented in 1911, which is why it's called that, but it's still a really great firearm today. But is that going to work for you? Maybe. I wouldn't discount it, even though it's over 100 years old, the design. I like SIG. The SIG P365 has done really well for me. Smith& and Wesson Shield, the P, I haven't shot much, but it seems to do a really nice job. It's good, it's comfortable. Smith& and Wesson has a great reputation. Glock, I want to like Glock. I just don't like how it feels in my hand. That's the only reason I don't like Glock. It just feels weird in my hand. But I know that if I had a Glock, I would trust it. I know I could trust it as long as it's taken care of and it's treated with respect. I hear good things about various, like some of the brands you mentioned, H&K. I really like the H&K that I have, except it's kind of bulky. So again, what is the purpose? Is
Right.
the fact that it's bulky going to matter at all, especially with carrying? Um, I've really been into SIG lately, though, especially the P365. I've never tried a Springfield, but Hellcat, the comparable in size to the 365, that's very appealing to me. And I'll tell you why. My hands are not big. So when I'm telling people, I'm giving them suggestions, I start out with what fits your hand. It doesn't matter if it's a great brand. If it doesn't fit you and it's difficult for you specifically to operate, it's not going to be a good choice for you.
Yep. Yeah. And that's
And that's going to eliminate a ton of options.
yeah, absolutely. No, definitely. And that's why there's options because, I think what we're getting into here is there's all these little just micro trade-offs where some are a little bit more glaring than others. Like Glock, admittedly, has a pretty bit of a chunk to it. They're chunkers, I guess we'll call them. So a lot of times people with small hands will have trouble getting all the way. And there's tons of other brands that make thick guns too. But getting that hand all the way around, getting that right positioning, just getting that right feel, and that's a good way to just immediately move on to other options. Again, I joke that there's 5 million of them, but if you factor in all the color schemes and everything, that might be not too much of an exaggeration. I mean, there is so many options out there, and that's why, because there is no perfect thing that fits every human being flawlessly. It doesn't exist. And I think really where we're kind of heading with this is everything's a trade-off, whether it's, the stippling on the gun, the grip size, the capacity, and that can be a little dictated by grip size, if it's single stack or double stack, and how much capacity you have, and the length of the barrel, and the type of holster and where it is. And there's pros and cons to everything. Whereas if you choose a bigger gun, it might be a little tougher to hide in shorts and a t-shirt. If you choose a tinier gun, it might be easier to hide in shorts and a t-shirt, but it might be tougher for you to shoot based on hand size and proficiency and that kind of stuff too. So there's trade-offs to everything, even with like red dots, like you mentioned. It's powered by a battery. Having a weapon light on your gun makes it a little bulkier, a little heavier. And, if you're somebody that never goes into a dark place ever in your life, then maybe you don't need a flashlight on your gun. Or if you are a night shifter that lives in the dark and you want to positively identify what you see, maybe a light's good for you. But again, it's trade-off because you got that bulk and now you need a new holster that's going to fit that light properly and all this stuff.
Yeah.
As we kind of move toward wrapping up our conversation here, what are, in your opinion, are there some other kind of key pieces of gear that go along with the firearm, whether it be pocket knives, lights? I won't rattle off a huge list here, but what are your thoughts on some gear to go along with carrying a firearm?
A spare magazine carrier, for one. I have gotten into I got into a situation in a training class where my magazine failed, and that was a lesson learned. Number one, maintain your magazines just as well as you maintain your firearm. Number two, you may need a spare because maybe if your gun malfunctions, there's things to do to clear that. If your magazine malfunctions, you're better off just swapping to a different magazine.
Right.
You might get one shot off and your magazine jams. Then what good is it? If you have a wonderful, amazing gun, now what? So a magazine carrier, one, at least, I would say at least one spare mag. I do try to also carry a light because a light alone might stop a problem, but I carry a separate light, very bright, something compact that fits easily in a pocket that is opposite of my firearm, so that if I need to blind somebody to give me extra time, they can't see me, they can't hit me, give me a spare moment to maybe get away. Wonderful. Plus, if you're in a dark situation, that's going to be helpful. And a knife. Because of where I come from and the things that I do, knives are just potentially very useful in the first place.
Yep.
And that, you know, that might be another really nice option rather than pulling out your firearm. And, every situation, your firearm might be your worst option. Yeah, carry what you don't want to be weighed down with gear. You're not Batman carrying a big tool belt and everything. So, like you said, trade-offs. What kind of lifestyle do you have? What kind of clothing are you wearing? What activities do you do? And is it truly feasible to carry that extra gear? So, kind of say, okay, make a list. Here's some stuff that I'd like to carry and why, and then try it. And then see what you might want to eliminate if you had to. And again, get more experience. Those
Yeah.
are the only things that I can really think of as far as gear.
Yeah. It's and that too is a journey and a progression of, if you're finding yourself weekly saying, "Hey, I wish I had this little thing with me," even if it's not to rabbit trail too hard here, but even if it's not related to defense, if you're constantly looking for pliers, maybe a multi-tool makes sense. If you're, a little more medically inclined, maybe a tourniquet makes sense. If flashlights are one of those things that once people start carrying one, they find they use it all the time. It's just easier to see stuff. It's, maybe kind of used as just another tool to kind of break something free or whatever. You find some other purposes for some of this stuff, not really with your firearm that really only has, a set use, but some of these other stuff like flashlights and knives and multi-tools and that kind of stuff and comfort items too, having some things that make some of this a little better. I know I mentioned an undershirt because I personally don't like the gut rubbing on my skin. That's one of those things that it's some of these comfort things of, really kind of thinking of it holistically, right down to your shoes and your socks and all the things that are going to set you up for success in life. It's again, I think the core theme here is this is a journey. It's not something you can take one class and be the most proficient master of or anything like that. It's a lifestyle and it's a journey, and it's figuring out these pieces and how they fit, and really taking a look too at one thing you mentioned there a second ago was sustainable. That wasn't the word you used, but that was the way I thought about it was, is this sustainable? Like, how is this realistically, if I want to carry every day, is that going to work with a staccato, a full size staccato, and I'm a plumber that is crawling around and bending a lot and moving a lot? Is that going to make sense to appendix carry a big, heavy, large firearm? Probably not. I'm probably going to end up leaving it at home or in the truck. Something a little smaller is going to be more sustainable because I'm going to actually carry it every day, uh, and that's kind of at least my take on that too, and agree with again a lot of what you said, and kind of as we close and wrap up here, do you have any kind of final thoughts or revisits on anything we talked about or anything um, that you want to hit on?
Yeah, yeah. Uh, one of the things never really thought entered the realm is knowing myself, understanding how I react in a high stress situation, an emergency situation. How likely am I to be, I would say, whereas if I'm carrying a firearm, I'm going to be less likely to be aggressive. Whereas if I'm not carrying something, maybe I might be a little bit more brave with my words, but then knowing, hey, what if they're carrying? I know I'm not, but what if they are? So, okay, maybe I need to work on me. I need to work on my mindset, how I need to be more focused on safety and peace, peaceful de-escalation, like you mentioned before. That's huge. Maybe I need to be a better person if I'm going to choose to carry this thing that could take a life in the blink of an eye. And what is it? What is the real danger out there versus I'm not out there being, a superhero just because I have a gun in my hip. No, maybe that means you need to try and stick to the back of the room more instead of being front and center. Try to blend in more instead of draw attention to yourself. Things that, it takes a mental shift.
Yep.
And some people may think that they get bolder with a firearm, and that's probably a bad mindset to have.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I joke a lot that it's a gentleman's game where, for the classic road rage incident, if, I'm going 54 and a 55 and somebody pulls in to the gas station with me and wants to let me know how much of an idiot I am because I'm driving a mile per hour under the speed limit, can I tell them that I'm going 1 mile under, it's icy, there's deer, that kind of stuff? Sure. Or could I just say, you know what, you're right. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have been going so slow. Sorry about that. It's one of those things. It's a strategy. It's knowing yourself. It's that look in the mirror, like you said, of I need to understand how I am and how I'm influencing these situations. And the goal should always be to de-escalate, avoid conflict, and never have to use that firearm. Absolutely. Completely an essential and vital mindset that we have to take on is, we can't add to the danger and the complexity and the issues in the world, because there's plenty of them. We need to be those individuals that try to bring peace and bring calm and not have horrible things happen and contribute to that. Yeah, so thank you very much for being here. Very much appreciated our conversation. I think we hit on a lot of things that are great to talk about and that deserve deeper dives too. That's the thing with a lot of conversations revolving readiness and that kind of stuff, is you might want to block out 24 hours, because it's one of those things where, again, it's a lifestyle, it's a journey, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So I very much appreciated your time. Thank you very much for being here. Our our listeners and viewers appreciate it as well. So where can they find you, especially if they're in Connecticut and they want to take one of your classes or something like that? Where can they find you? How can they get a hold of you? What's a great way to reach you?
Well, I would say at the moment, the best way to reach me is on my email address, gst.na@outlook.com, or you could reach me on my cell phone, 03-520-9930. But with all the scammers that are out there, make sure that if you're reaching out, make it clear why, because I may decline the call because I don't recognize the number. So yeah, just make sure that you're reaching out and say why, and you draw my attention. Oh, hey, this person needs some info. Let me
Yeah.
get back to them.
Yep. Leave a voicemail, and in that subject line, mention why you're emailing for sure. So
Absolutely.
give you a
Thank
call
you
or
so
two.
much.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. Very much appreciate it, Devon. Thank you very much for being here and your time. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Prepared to Prevail. Please visit preparedtoprevail.com for more resources and educational materials.